Okay. Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm glad to see you all here. Oh. So I'm glad to see you all here for my humble presentation. My name is Ibrahim Bilshad and I'm one of the UG4 students, but I guess you all know that. And today, instead of presenting a topic, I thought I might do something a bit unconventional, and I'll try to answer a question. And this question is, why is it hard to eat healthy? And to answer this question, we're going to use a bit of behavioral psychology, we're going to use some evolution and some science, and lastly, some business. So,
when life doesn't give you second chance.
Is it on?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, but I have to connect this one.
Should I control it? There,
If you can come, yeah. I don't know what happened. It was working perfectly.
Wait a minute, I'll make it something.
وما تدرس شيء مؤخرا تعطيكي
I didn't know about application.
أولنا رأيت أول وكيل عرف تأكل وين دقائق هذا بس لا يديك كمان بس لا يديك كمان أنيميشن
Okay.
كان لي ألكسندر أخطأ
Okay. Bit of technical difficulties. Stay there. Okay, so before we dive into the topic, I just want to give an overview of what we're going to be explaining. So first, we're going to talk about motivation and what is the reward system in our brains. Second of all, we're going to talk about the relationship between us and our tongues. And lastly, we're going to talk about business. So, we all know if your diet consistently looks something like this, and thank you, sir. Yeah, we all know if our diets look a little something like this consistently, and if our idea of a fun and relaxing time is something resembling this, then it wouldn't really come as a surprise if we end up looking a little like this. The picture a bit.
I'm here because I got مش خليني
لا خلينا
Okay, the picture might be a bit exaggerated, but I think you all get my point. So, we all know nowadays, through the age of information, from a child to an adult, that obesity is a risk factor for a lot of things, from high blood pressure to high cholesterol to type 2 diabetes and plaques in your coronary arteries. But these are all dangerous, but nothing to compare with erectile dysfunction. I mean, that's very serious. And I'm not talking just about the patient's genitalia, maybe their whole body. They become so fat they cannot stand erect. So, since we know all of this, then why is obesity on the rise? Why is it still increasing? Now, from 1999 through 2018, the prevalence of obesity in America has increased from 30.5 to 42.4, and morbid obesity has increased from 4.7 to 9.2. These numbers were already big numbers, and now they are even bigger. And this data was published by the National Center of Health Statistics, February 2020. I mean, why? Why is it increasing? We all know obesity is bad and it's going to kill you. Then why? So to answer this, we need to know a bit about the reward system. Now, what is the reward system? Here is the scientific definition. It's the mesocortical limbic circuit collection of brain structure, neural pathways, blah, blah, blah. This is very scientific and technical. My definition is the reward system is what rewards you when you have something delicious. When you eat a big juicy steak, you feel good about yourself. This is the reward system working. when you find yourself a handsome young man or a handsome, beautiful lady, you're going to feel happy. This is the reward system working. And humans like to have babies, and when you have a baby, you feel good. So these are all things that the reward system is telling you that it's good for you. And this is important because if something, let's say food, had no taste, there was no reward for food, people wouldn't really eat that much. If, let's say, intercourse did not reward you with dopamine and fun and all of that, people wouldn't do it that much. And again, babies and stuff like, childbirth is painful, but they say it's worth the pain. I don't know, I'm not a mother. So now we know a little bit about the reward system. Now I'll give you an example. Here is a beautiful bird. It's called the Minnesota gray shrike. So from the name, it's from Minnesota, a state in the United States. It's gray, if you look at the feathers, and it's shrike. I don't know what shrike means. Maybe it resembles Shrek in some way. But anyhow, we're going to learn a bit about the life of the Minnesota gray shrike. Now, the Minnesota gray shrike, it's a bird of prey. It means it hunts. It's a hunter. It wakes up in the morning, flies around, looks at the ground. If there's a worm wiggling or an insect moving about, it will go and hunt this insect. But it wouldn't kill it right away, and it won't eat it right away. There's something special about the Minnesota gray shrike. There's a tree in Minnesota that has thorns, these sharp things on the branches. The gray shrike takes the insect or the mouse, rodent, whatever it is, and impales it on this thorn, killing it. Now, why would the Minnesota gray shrike do that? What's the point? You should eat it right away. That's a rhetorical question, sorry. Now, the whole point about this is just reward. Now, what is the reward that the Minnesota gray shrike is getting? It's intercourse. It does this to attract mates. So, let's say I'm a gray shrike and I have a tree. I go and I catch insects and I put them on my tree, and other males are doing the same thing. They all have trees. And the females of the shrike species, they fly around and they look at the trees of every male, and they see whichever male has more insects on his trees, they go and mate with them. Mate with the male with the more stuff. Reminds me of females of another species. So, the shrike gets a reward from doing this, and this reward is, of course, mating. Now let's look at the day in the life of the gray shrike. It hunts food, and then puts the food on the tree, and then makes shrike babies. And from the mating, there's the boom, the endorphins, the dopamine, the enjoyment. And it's all about this. It's all about the enjoyment, seeking the enjoyment. Motivational triad, what is that? It looks a bit intimidating, but all creatures or animals behave in a similar way. They seek pleasure, the Minnesota puts the birds on the thing, to seek pleasure, to seek the females. Pain avoidance. Now birds, let's say for example, when the climate gets a bit warm, let's say in Kurdistan, they migrate from Kurdistan to Turkey because it's nice and cold there. If it's too cold in Turkey, they go back to Kurdistan. So they avoid pain. If there's a hawk flying around, there's a predator, they go and hide. They avoid pain. Energy conservation. Now, they need to be as efficient with their energy as possible because it's not guaranteed that they're always going to find a worm, that they're always going to find an insect. Maybe days and weeks go by without them finding anything at all. So they have to conserve energy. And now let's do a little experiment with the gray shrike. Let's have a specimen and let's put it in a cage and play with it. So we're going to give this shrike two buttons inside the cage, a blue button and a red button. The blue button is going to open a door full of insects and plastic thorns. The shrike can go and take the insects and put them there, play around, hunt, and get some enjoyment. And the red button is going to be the magic button. It's going to open a door and a female would walk into the cage all ready to rock and roll. Now, in your opinion, which button do you think the Shrike, the male Shrike, would press? Of course, it's the red button. Why? Because if you remember the motivational triad, it's pleasure-seeking. Both activities are pleasure-seeking, but the mating has more pleasure. It's energy conservation. You're not doing your job, you're getting the reward right away, the reward being mating. And it's pain avoidance. If you're going to hunt, maybe sometimes the prey will bite you or sting you or something like that. So it's doing the most efficient thing by pressing the red button and getting the reward. Now, another example would be, let's say if we get an office worker, someone who works 22 days a week, 9 to 5 job, works at an office, and you give him 2 options, 2 buttons, just like the Minnesota Gray Shrike. The blue button opens the door to his office, and he can work as long as he wants and make as much money as he can physically make. The red button gives him the paycheck at the end of the month every time he presses the red button. Of course, the poor office worker is going to press the red button and get paycheck after paycheck right away because they want the reward. It's pleasure-seeking, it's energy conservation, you're not working, and you're avoiding pain by working. Maybe your work is painful. Now, let's do another experiment. Let's modify this. Experiment number 2. Now, this time, the blue button is going to be the magic button where the female comes into the room and they can mate, 2 birds. And the red button is going to be a cocaine dispenser. Psychologists love cocaine. So what happens now, if you remember the motivational triad again, you have pleasure-seeking. Both activities give you pleasure, but the cocaine gives a tremendous amount of pleasure, more. Now, energy conservation. When the female walks into the cage, the Minnesota Shrike has to make a dance and sing around, and if the female likes it, he's going to say, okay, he's good enough, and they're going to mate. But here, he's going to get the reward right away without doing any work. And it's pain avoidance. Maybe sometimes the female will say, peck his feathers, or hate him, or hit him, or something. Okay, so what do we learn from this example? We learn that if we can skip right towards the reward, we're going to get hooked on the reward, and we're going to neglect ourselves. In the cocaine experiment, in this experiment, what happened was, when he got hooked on the cocaine, the Minnesota Shrike, he kept pressing that button, and they gave him more cocaine. They put females after females, they put bugs after bugs and insects. He would ignore food, he would ignore water, he would ignore beautiful birds, and he would go for the cocaine. He would neglect himself, and in 2-3 days, he would die out of dehydration and starvation. So here, we can learn that if you get the reward, you're going to neglect yourself. And this is quite similar, let's say, to food. In our ancestors' time, food was something rare. You had to work for food. Nowadays, you can get food right away. You get the reward without doing the work, the hard work. You all have to wait. You only have to wait. And sometimes we get mad for waiting too long for the delivery driver to come back. Now, let's go back in time to the time of ancient humans and cavemans and women's. And let's look at their jobs. Their jobs were quite similar to the Minnesota Gray Shrike. The only thing they had to do was survive and reproduce. Food and mating. That was the only thing, and they focused on it, and they were really good at it. Let's see what our ancestors were. They were hunter-gatherers, meaning they would hunt animals and get food and gather it for when they needed, when there was no hunting or food. Anthropologists discovered evidence that hunter-gatherer practice by modern Homo sapiens, us, and our distant ancestors, dates as far as back as 2 million years. So they've been doing this for a long time. And what they did, they had to walk around and go miles after miles to hunt for something. And these anthropologists say sometimes if the ancient human was lucky, he could find a prey in 7 miles. 7 miles is not really a short distance. And if he was unlucky, he would have to search 500 miles for just, let's say, a rabbit or something. 500 miles is from here to Hazi Umaran and back, and then some more. So they had to work really hard for their bread and butter. They had to work really, really hard. Now, throughout history, let's go a bit forward in time, fat people, throughout history, humans worked, and fat people were not rare. But who were the fat people? They were the pharaohs. They were the chief of a clan. They were the kings and the emperors. Not all of them, but some of them. And the poor people, like these peasants, they had very little to eat. All they could eat maybe potatoes or rice or something, while the rich would feast on meats of all animals and everything extravagant and exotic. Now, let's say the fat peoples of history, someone that's as rich as King Louis of, I don't know, France or somewhere, all he had to do was ring a bell, and his butler would bring whatever his heart would desire. Now, these were the fat people of history. These were the kings of before. Now, what about the modern day? What about our time? Who are the kings of today? The king of today has a mobile phone and gets his butler to bring him, or the delivery driver, whatever he wants. Pizza, hamburgers, whatever your heart desires. So we see that nowadays we're eating and dining like the kings and queens of the past. So that is a problem. And now we're going to talk more about the relationship between humans and taste. Let's go back in time again. So we have here a clan of hunter-gatherers. They are looking for food, and what they find is very little. They only find two trees. One of them has long leaves, and one of them has flat leaves. Now, which one would they go for? I mean, that's quite dramatic, and this is probably realistic, because not always they had meat and stuff to eat like us today. Now, taste was our greatest weapon for that. This is a eucalyptus tree, and this is vine, waraq inab, galameo, what we like to eat. The taste of this, and I have tasted it because it grows near my house, it tastes really bitter. It is disgusting and nasty, and it is poisonous as well. There's a disease called eucalyptus leaf poisoning. It contains some compounds that are bad for your liver. And grape leaves, they are good to eat. They're okay. Yeah, sweet. Dolma, yes. Now, let's say this clan found a dead cow somewhere that was quite fresh. Now, let's let them use their taste to choose between the good leaves and the piece of meat. Which one tastes better? Of course, the meat tastes better because it contains more fat, more protein. It contains minerals that maybe it's less bioavailable from the leaves, and it's more energy dense. So that's why it's more delicious. Usually things that are more delicious, it means it contains more calories. It is better, it has more energy inside of it. And energy was something very, very important for their survival. And this survives on to us because we're their progeny. Nowadays, let's say the reward to food, let's compare two groups of food. We have cucumbers and carrots, and we have here a nice, delicious burger, and we have chocolate, really sweet. Now, I did this to my little cousin. Her name is Tavi. She is the most beautiful little girl ever. I gave her a piece of candy and a cucumber and told her which one she would like to choose. Of course, she chose the piece of chocolate and threw the cucumber away because your reward system gets a bigger boom. It goes bazooka for something that has sugar or salt or fat and oil. And as a child, they don't really have much control over their action. And even adults, they let themselves go obese. Because they're always after the bigger boom, the bigger reward. They're after that. Now here is a graph that explains the picture from before. This graph is taken from The Pleasure Trap. It's a book by a psychologist called Doug Lisle. Really good, and I recommend the book. So here in this graph, they have a pleasure. So the more up you go, the more pleasure you have, and we have 5 phases. In phase 1, okay, so this is normal pleasure. This is surplus, more pleasure, like extreme pleasure, and here is a zone of not that much pleasure. You have a normal person eating normal things like rice, corn, potatoes, vegetables, meat, a balanced diet. And then you give this person something calorie dense, energy dense, like let's say a burger or a steak or something like a pizza. And their pleasure centers fire up like a Christmas tree, and they experience a lot of pleasure. They go to the enhanced pleasure zone. And they're going to eat this and they say, wow, these things taste really good compared to the stuff that I was eating. But they're not going to be there for long, because we have a phenomenon in the brain called neural adaptation or habituation. They're going to go down. The high-fat, high-calorie food is going to become their normal now. It's going to replace the rice and corn and potatoes that they were eating, or balanced diet, whatever it is. Now, their balanced diet, their normal reward is going to be the calorie-dense food. Let's say the person eats a carrot or a cucumber. They're going to get very little pleasure out of it. They used to get normal pleasure out of it, but now, because they're used to the high pleasure, they're used to it, they're going to experience less pleasure out of the good things for them that contain fiber, that has a lot of water. And if you stay long enough down here, if you eat cucumbers long enough, it's going to start becoming normal again. You can up the neural circuitry for the reward system will go up, and you're going to like cucumbers again. So our food is so delicious now. I'm going to talk about a little study. Our food is so delicious that even rats love it. Italian-American food scientist called Anthony Sclafani in the early 2000s said, what would happen if I give my lab rats human food? What will they look like? So he divided his rats into a control group, normal rat food, nuts and seeds and stuff like that. And the other group, he gave them Fruit Loops and, let's say, Snickers and Reese's Puffs and Kit Kats and all of that stuff. Really, really sweet stuff, contain a lot of sugar. And here you have sunflower seeds. Now, what happened to the rats is quite interesting. This is, I don't have to tell you which one is the control group and which one is the candy group, because it's quite apparent. What he observed is when the control group mice or rats, I don't know what they are, when they ate the nuts and the seeds, when they got full, they just stopped eating and went around and played in their cage. But the ones that were eating the candy and the Snickers and the Kit Kats, they could not stop eating. They would eat and eat even when they were full. Because, just like the humans, the ancestors of the rat didn't find stuff that were so sweet and delicious. Their brain was telling them, this is good, this is full of calories, eat more of this, because you might not get it afterwards. So, this was how addictive our food is to rats. Now, we're going to talk about the food industry, which is quite an interesting topic in my opinion. And if it wasn't for this presentation, I wouldn't be aware of it. Food is a big business for big people with big brands like McDonald's, KFC, and all of the above. And according to the New York Times, the revenue of all the fast food industry, the top 30 brands of these, in 2020, remember 2020 was a lockdown year. People couldn't go to restaurants, and usually restaurants were closed down because they need people to come in and all of that. But their revenue was estimated to be $200 billion. That's only inside America, the United States. $200 billion. I can buy all of Holier, Slimani, and the Hook, and still have money to spend around however I want. And globally, they had a revenue of $570 billion. $570 billion. And by the way, this is only the top 30 brands, neglecting the smaller ones. Now that we know that food is a big business, and their profits are so big, how is their profit so big? How are they making so much money? And that's because their food is super normal. Their foods are saturated with fats and salts and sweets, things that our brains are hardwired to love and crave. And they don't shy away from putting more salt and sugar and oil in their foods because they want us to go and buy even more from them. Now, McDonald's, the brand that we talked about earlier, it's quite famous globally. It employs 500 food scientists and doctors. Now, why would a food brand need doctors and food scientists? That's because their food, their recipes, are engineered to have the perfect ratio of the things that we crave, like salt and sugar and fats. So their food is literally made from a lab. Now, talking about all of this money, I got a bit greedy myself, and I have a business idea to share with all of you. And maybe you can all be my partners, maybe sponsors too. No, thank you, that was a rhetorical question. Okay. No, sir. Just wait. My business idea is going to... I was hoping Dr. Marwan would be here, but no problem. My business idea is kid beer. We're going to sell alcohol, yes, vodka and alcohol, to kids. Wait. So, now kids, usually people who are under 18 or 21, they're not allowed to drink. That's in most countries. So there's a big portion of the market just not drinking, and we want to make an alcohol brand to sell to kids. I mean, quite unethical, but let's go with it. So let's talk about the effects of alcohol. Let's be smart about our business idea. Let's see what alcohol's effects are, the immediate effects. It causes slurred speech, drowsiness, vomiting, all the way to blackouts and impaired judgment, and you should not drive, and all of that. That's because about 10% or less of the alcohol gets metabolized by the brain. And when that happens, you're not going to be normal. You're going to be slurring your speech and, I don't know, shouting your lungs out and singing some really weird songs. And the long-term effects include high blood pressure, stroke, and we all know them. And we have alcoholic liver disease too, which is specifically for alcohol. Now this is really bad. How can we give kids something that's this bad? It's not going to go, it's not going to sell very well. So we should design something that's better than alcohol. Let's find a substance that doesn't have so much immediate effects, so the kids don't go drunk to their kindergarten, and something with less long-term effects. And we have sugar. Now let's see what sugar does. Now we're going to do a research and then we're going to come back to the business idea. Research by the students and faculty of Connecticut College. What they did, they love experimenting on rats. That's what I found out through this presentation. So what they did was give Oreos, that's a candy brand, I don't know if you've seen it or not, it's quite famous too. They give lab mice Oreos and they gave them brain scans to see what would happen. And they gave them cocaine and heroin too, just for fun. I mean, scientists after all. So the study draws out that Oreo cookies and its cream filling were as addictive as cocaine and morphine, and they gave the rats or the mice a bazooka of dopamine. And their pleasure centers were lit up even more than the drugs. So they found out that sugar is as powerful as these drugs that are illegal to sell and illegal to market, although sugar is available everywhere. It's in my kitchen and your kitchen probably. And here's a joke that's made for this experiment specifically. Here are the rats eating Oreos and they say, dude, I hope this experiment never ends because they're having so much fun. Now, let's go back to the alcohol idea, or our sugar. Now, let's go to the immediate effects of sugar. Sugar doesn't really have so much drunkenness or slurred speech or impaired motor judgment. And it has a bit of long-term effects, but it doesn't have the brain damage and the stomach and throat cancer and some of the others. But it still has something. Let's exchange the alcohol liver disease for non-alcoholic liver disease this time. And unfortunately, I just remembered, I have tough luck. This idea has been already taken by things like Pepsi and Coca-Cola. They're full of sugar. They don't make you drunk, but they're very addictive and delicious too. And not just sugar. They also, if you look at the back of the can, they put caffeine, which is another substance with its own effects and stuff. So with that, I would like to give a summary and answer the question that we had. Why is it hard to eat healthy? And what is the answer that I came up with? First, it feels good, you know, eating things that are delicious or bad for you at this time. For our ancestors, this stuff would have been really great because they don't really have so much food. But for us, it feels good, but it's bad. And we love feeling good. We love it. And the second thing is a multi-billion-dollar industry is doing its best to keep you buying their products. Pepsi wants you to buy more. McDonald's wants you to buy more. Everybody wants you to buy more. The only person that's going to not benefit from this is your wallet and your waistline. So a big fat thank you to all of you for attending, and thank you very much.
You want to put some names?